So now, the next time you feel angry and you can convince yourself that, yes, this is anger. Yes, I do feel anger. That's okay. I'm going to admit it. Then you can understand where it's coming from. Here it is. Just write this down. Anger is the natural response to moral injustice. Anger is the natural response to moral injustice. In fact, anger is a good thing. There was a moment in time when Jesus walked into the temple courts and he saw that the entire temple courts were filled with people buying and selling things so that the foreigners who were visiting Jerusalem could not get into the temple area to worship God. It was as if we had parked all of our cars right around this street and blocked all of the roads leading to this area so that only the people with the password could come to church this morning. And if we had done something like that, that would be akin to what Jesus found when he went to the temple. And what Jesus experienced in that moment was a sense that there was a great moral injustice being done. The people of God, so they thought they were keeping the foreigners away from God. And so Jesus got all uptight. I mean, he made a whip out of leather, and he started overturning tables, and he started rampaging the entire place. Anger is the right, normal, natural response to moral injustice. The problem is, many of us are more aware of injustice when it's done to me than when it's done to anyone else. And that kind of anger is selfish anger. You've done me wrong. That's injustice. Therefore, you must be punished. Ultimately, that's what anger is. It's the desire to see someone else pay for the wrong that they've done. And as long as I'm focused internally on the injustice that I have felt, my anger is only going to lead down a pathway of wanting more and more to eliminate you from the sphere of my life. I've jotted down some thoughts on the progression of anger, just some things that I thought about. An anger thought might be something like this: if you weren't here, I wouldn't have this pain. If you weren't here, I wouldn't have these memories. If you weren't here, I wouldn't have these scars. If you weren't here, I wouldn't have this worry. If you weren't here, my life would be better. And the shortest pathway between the life with you here and the life without you here is murder. The first time we find anger in the Bible, it's Cain and Abel angry. Cain is angry at Abel. It's a stupid thing, really. Many of you know the story. Cain and Abel are brothers. They've just been born from Adam and Eve, so they're among the first children in the world. We don't know if Adam and Eve had any other children besides Cain and Abel before them. We don't know all those kinds of things. We think Abel was the first one to be born, we don't really know all the details of all that stuff. We just know that these two guys were brothers. And there they are, and Abel is a shepherd, and he's raising sheep. And Cain is a farmer, and he's raising plants and fruits and things. And Cain's working hard to raise his fruits. And Abel's working hard to raise his sheep. They're both working hard. And they both want to honor God with what they've produced. And so Cain brings to God some fruits and vegetables, and he sets them up on an altar, and he tries to light them on fire. And it's really hard to light an apple on fire. And here's Abel, and he brings a sheep, and he sets it on the altar, and he, uses some lighter fluid and maybe some charcoal or whatever, and he gets his thing to burn. And so he gets his thing to burn, and I'm kind of speculating this because we know that Cain and Abel both knew that somehow God appreciated Abel's more. It's possible in their limited understanding of God that it was just because Cain's couldn't burn and Abel's did, and boy, it smelled really good when it burned, and apples don't smell as great when they're burning. So, but lamb, So anyway, someday we're going to have a barbecue, and we're just going to call it a sacrifice, and then we'll just have ourselves some fun. But so anyway, here these guys are doing their thing, and Cain sees Abel, and he's ticked off because Abel's sacrifice is working, and God seems to be pleased with Abel's sacrifice. And Cain thinks that God's not pleased with his sacrifice. And so instantaneously, Cain says, there is a moral injustice here. I've worked just as hard for this sacrifice as Abel has worked for his sacrifice. In fact, I've worked harder because sheep grow on their own. But apples, you got to cultivate and graft and do all this weird stuff to them. I've been working just as hard. I'm bringing a sacrifice. God should appreciate my thing too. And again, we don't know all the details, all the backstory, all the inner workings of their things, but we can imagine what's going through Cain's mind, where he's looking at Abel and he says, dude, if you weren't here, then the only one God could approve of would be me. If you weren't here, I wouldn't feel this shame that I feel. And so God actually makes an appearance to Cain. And he says, Cain, what are you doing? Don't you realize that sin is ready to take you over? And if you don't respond well, it will win. Cain ignores God and he ends up killing his brother Abel. And thus the first anger turns into the first murder. There's something in our hearts that allows anger to burn over a sense of selfish injustice. You have done me wrong. And it only leads down this pathway of isolating us from each other, even to the point of murder. Here's some blanks you might want to fill in. I wrote it down this way. Murder comes from a selfish heart that wants a shortcut. Murder comes from a selfish heart that wants a shortcut. You see, the shortest path between you here and you not here is you dead. Okay, let's dig a little deeper into adultery. I found this verse here, Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus addresses adultery. He says this, you've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Jesus is addressing adultery, and here he says the thing lying beneath the surface of adultery is simply a lustful heart. Now, I just want to show you a couple statistics on the screen here. I'm not going to narrate them. I'm not going to necessarily read them all out loud. And those of you sitting in the back, I'm sorry, you won't be able to read these. So you might want to put on your glasses or pinch, the little telescope thing or something. Because these are some statistics, and I'm just going to let it run. And I want you to just let it sink in as you see these things come by.